Hello and welcome to this presentation on incarcerated and refugee populations, environmental and cultural factors by Mark Radmel and Aubrey Nilsson. We'd like to start off with the media, talk about the media. So the media does a lot to help raise awareness of problems that are in the criminal justice system. However, some issues of incarceration are either framed as encouragement of hopelessness for incarcerated individuals, or they're highlights the organizations are pushing to help reform and change those problems. Incarcerated conditions also help shape the way for the news, which kind of frames each given scenario one story at a time. And sometimes those can be good and sometimes those can be bad. For refugees, we'd kind of like to encourage you to look up Leonard Bagalwa on YouTube to see a touching story and a hopeful true story. Leonard was taken away from his family and forced to be a rebel and spy. He was protected by the Pygmies. He went through very traumatic events and is changing the world a little at a time now. He currently is the director of the Utah Community Refugee Partnership Center. As far as family support for incarcerated individuals, research suggests that when an inmate has lasting family ties while incarcerated, this impact can help deter future incidents of crime when they are let out. However, the lack of family support also increases the risk for criminal relapse when they get out as well, just because they don't have that support. As far as refugees, upon arrival into a new country, it is vital that these refugees fill those basic needs, such as love and belonging. But if the individual has to leave their family to relocate, that will be a void spot for a very long time and make it difficult for them. As far as role of peers, criminologic and protection influences on one another can really help in the incarcerated population. It has mixed effects. Models show peer involvement can increase substance use and criminal involvement while also lowering the odds of substance use and criminal involvement depending on the peer group that they get in. So either it can help them break away from that and get out of that, or sometimes it can keep them in it. As far as refugees go, mental and emotional instability caused from living in traumatic experiences may influence social abilities, whether it's good or bad for some of those refugees. It can also create deep mistrust and language barriers, which are both contributing factors in this case, because sometimes they're in a new country and have new peers, people that they just don't really know. So we'd like to pose the question, have you ever had to be the odd man out in a gamer situation? Was it known, or were you the only person who knew? Could other people relate with you about your specific experience? Those are just some questions that we'd like to pose and have you think to yourself on. As far as cyclical nature with incarcerated individuals, some offenders continue to offend despite their relationships with others or their employment or other pro-social involvements, while others are able to reform their lives because of the relationships or employment or positive involvements that they have when they are out of prison. Criminal activity is the only, and yeah, sometimes criminal activity is the only life they know. It's the only way that they can support their families. And so sometimes they just, they'll go to prison and they'll get out and they'll just get right back into the same cycle. Some of those individuals are addicted to either the criminal lifestyle or the drugs that are associated with that crime. With refugees, it's having that being insecure in regards to loss. A lot of refugees don't have their family right there with them. And so sometimes it's easy for them to stay in that life. But while they're in that life, they continue to worry about their family members because they are, in most cases, in a new country or a different country, and they don't get to see their families. Sometimes they have ambivalent feelings about staying in a new place. I'm sure a lot of people, they want to go back home, but they are in a new country, either trying to find a job to help support their family so they can send money back, or because the living circumstances in that country doesn't allow them to stay there. So their life is kind of split between two different worlds. The worlds that the world that they knew or the country that they lived in, and then this new country that they are trying to either work in or trying to find refuge in. And sometimes this can cause a traumatic experience for them, especially if they don't speak the language. They can have a really tough time with it. Legal and political system with the criminal incarcerated population. Criminal justice it's neither simple nor perfect. It's a complex system, and sometimes, and in many ways, it's a broken system and doesn't necessarily work as we think it should. Essentially, imprisonment is an exercise of power that is influenced by political influences, policy decisions, and public responses in the media perceptions and how they view it. With refugees, HIAS is dedicated to helping and legally protect refugees, giving them a place to live and helping them have a life that is away from violence or away from the lifestyle or the country, the living situations that they were in. They make sure that no matter where they are living, refugees know their rights, let them know what the legal laws are for that country. They also provide aid navigating and the complicated legal system to lead these individuals to permanent status and security so that they feel secure. Potential barriers, minimal assistance, inadequate resources, and minimal preparation with incarcerated individuals help with reentry into society and communities. And sometimes those barriers or those things are just lacking. And so sometimes it's hard for those individuals when they get out of prison to maintain employment due to employers are reluctant to hire them, especially since they have a criminal background. Difficulty securing housing also after being released with little or no funds at all. They can't find an apartment to live in, and so they have no place to go. With refugees, yes, these individuals they definitely need financial assistance, but money doesn't solve all problems or help them overcome all the barriers which they have to surpass. Another question that we'd like to pose and have you ask yourself, what kind of barriers do you think that these communities have to overcome? And how can we as nurses influence our communities to be advocates for these populations? Psychologically, many refugees feel that they do not belong. It's a different world. It's a different place for them. This may be attributed to the major culture change which they have to experience. International scope with incarcerated population, over 11 million individuals are imprisoned globally. Around 102 countries report prison occupancy that's well over capacity, approaching 110% of their limit to house inmates. And the extent of issues related with human rights violations originating from over-imprisonment came to light, especially in this last year when COVID-19 broke out. With refugees, the global statistic in 2019 showed that there were 26 million refugees, of which half were women and children. In 2021, so just starting this year, the U.S. has a national refugee limit of only 15,000 for the whole year. And this is the lowest limit that our nation has seen since the year 1980 when the Refugee Act was passed. Together, these two groups make up 37 million people. To us, this may seem just like a really large number, but to them, it is their lives, families, neighbors, and friends. Socioeconomic status. Men and women have been incarcerated, or that have been incarcerated, have a greater probability of experiencing mental health issues. Studies show that inmates of both genders are more likely to have health issues that range from hypertension, asthma, cancer, arthritis, hepatitis C, tuberculosis, and HIV. And that is partly due to poor medical treatment, due to inadequate medical staff and medications, and sometimes the facility not having the proper medical equipment. With refugees, physically, many refugees have been through extreme traumatic experiences, which often cause physical anxiety, PTSD, and other depression that really affects how they live. Race and ethnicity. Incarcerated rates are seen amongst amongst those of racial ethnicity minorities, also those that are in areas of low education. Ethnic groups that are incarcerated are 1 out of 87 whites, 1 out of 36 Hispanics, and 1 out of 12 blacks are part of those statistics in the incarcerated population. And 68% of the world's refugee population comes from just 5 countries. As far as religion, many inmates practice their religion on a personal basis while incarcerated. It is believed that religious practices are increased because of the difficulties that are faced in prison life. For many, it gives them the opportunity to find a sense of direction that is better than their current psychological or physical condition that they are presently experiencing, and in many cases, it's almost even better than the neighborhoods or the area that they came from. Gender health disparities. Mandatory sentencing is issued equally to both male and female genders, and is kind of a problem, even if the female played a smaller role in the crime. So if she assisted maybe a male who was robbed a facility, but she was just driving away, she gets the same sentence that he does. Women are more likely to be solely responsible for children they have as well. Psychiatric disorders are likely to be higher in incarcerated females than males, and women are more likely to be incarcerated with a mix of different level offenses together, whereas men are separated by their offenses, and that is partly due to because men tend to be more violent when put together. In a study of refugees in Italy, 46.5% experienced at least one episode of violence in their stay in Italy. 68.6% of those reported that the sit of violence was in street. 68.6% of these individuals did not know their perpetrators. Geographical location. Some locations for prisons are not located in the best areas to decrease the likelihood, such as natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, and tornadoes. And some of these facilities are built on landfills, increasing the possibility of water contamination, building structure failure, and effects to local communities. Top 3 refugee crisis countries. Over 25% of total global refugees are from the 10-year Syrian crisis. 1 in 10 refugees come from Afghanistan. And South Sudan conflict has driven nearly 4 million people from their homes to abroad communities. Health disparities and bias. Incarceration for nonviolent poverty-related offenses at unequal rates for women as compared to men. Women are 63% more likely than men to be put in jail or prison for simple drug possessions, and incarcerated women are 85 to 90% more likely to have experienced physical or sexual abuse than men are, either before or during their stay. Refugees, prejudice biases are based on color, gender, language, and customs, all being different from the country that they're in. Health disparities, international scope. Prisoners live in marginal ends of society, are poorly educated, and come from socioeconomically disadvantaged areas. These populations often have unhealthy ways of living due to alcohol, smoking, and drug use that leave them in poor health. Refugees tend to prefer or refer back to their homeland lifestyle and are some of the risks there. Major risk factors are health illiteracy, tobacco and alcohol use, poor diet, and inactivity. These lead to diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and chronic lung disease. And these are our reference. Thank you for joining us for this presentation.